Mr. Tomi?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, very clearly.
Yeah. Okay. How are you?
I'm great. Yourself?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you.
Alrighty. Looks like we're all here. I'm really, again, appreciate you guys taking the time to hold this little interview with me.
Okay.
So, just to reiterate, have a little YouTube channel called Vote for Holt, but I'm not going to talk about that for very long. I play mystery and horror and adventure games of the sort, and I played Painscreek about a year ago on my channel, and I absolutely loved it and thought it was a very, very unique and interesting design for a game. And since then, I have begun work on a video that is more or less trying to perform a dissection of the game and understand how it has this very unique approach and how it works. So I was hoping that you might be able to lend me some insight today and some questions I had about the game.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. Go ahead.
First and foremost, I'd like to offer if you two would like to introduce yourselves. I have read the Making of Painscreek Killings book, but many of the people watching this interview I'm sure have not. So if you'd like to each take a moment to describe who you are and what role you played in the development of the game, feel free to do so.
Okay. Yoshi, you want to go or?
Yeah, okay, I guess I can go. My name is Yoshi Tsuchida, or Yoshi for short. What my role in the game development was the level designer. I worked on I took charge of organizing the production and how to go about building all the assets and putting them into the level. And I worked on the project for about 4 or 5 years ish. And that's pretty much I think my I've done also music for writing some of the music for the game, and probably maybe basic production work like creating assets and texturing props of the sort and playtesting. Yeah.
The whole nine.
Okay.
Mr. Tomi, yourself?
Right. So I was the main writer for the story, and I'm also the one directing the project. So that's my main role for the Painscreek Killings.
And it's I believe you began EQ Studios. You were considered the founder.
Right. Right. So halfway through kind of like developing the game, I think it was like a year before release, we decided to officially file EQ Studios as a business company. So together with a friend of mine, we started EQ Studios.
Right.
Officially. Right.
And I'm sure you could fill a book with all the details of how it started, and you did. So we can leave the further details to that to the wayside for now, and I will get closer to the questions I have. So first, I want to clarify the process that I went to in the video that I'm making, because part of the reason, of course, that Painscreek is so interesting to me is that I believe you would agree it is considered an open world mystery, or a non-linear mystery in a sense. And with that style of design, there is a lot of room for player engagement and reward and achievement, and also a lot of room for disaster if things don't go well. So what I've done in my video is that I've actually found 4 volunteers who played the game in full on their own YouTube channels, and they have lent me their footage, and I have done this massive dissection where I do a play-by-play of all 4 of their experiences to find out who finds what clues, who overlooks what puzzles give people problems, if anybody felt that they needed hints in your otherwise hintless game, and most importantly, who was able to solve the mystery before the end. And as of today, I have finished a annotated viewing of more than 60 hours of the game now, and
Wow.
with my data pool, which it is not the most precise data pool in the world. It would have been a lot more accurate if I had more people, but with my budget, that's about as good as I can get, having 4 different detectives. I just have some interesting findings and questions that I wanted to ask you about. So without further ado, if you're ready, I can get into some of my questions.
Yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
Let's do it.
So first thing that comes to mind, in your words, both of you, can you clarify what your intention was in making the Painscreek Killings the way you did? Making a mystery game with no hints and trying to capture realism.
So I think I might be able to answer that. So with the Painscreek Killings, there wasn't really a specific design as to how it should work as a game. we were transitioning from a freelance work into creating our own IP. So we decided to delve into the game industry, and with very limited manpower and experience at that time, we knew that we could only make a walking simulator. However, what we wanted was to create a feeling of a detective experience that you feel when you watch a film, like let's say Zodiac or any TV shows that is about solving a crime. Right, so we went to look at the game market and we realized there's not a lot of games that actually has that. I think that they are really afraid of that players would not be able to solve it, or it would be too easy. So out of a lot of considerations, they designed the way it is. However, when we look at those games, we realize that the games somehow doesn't give you the feeling of being a detective. You are still a detective, but it just doesn't feel like the TV show, So I think that's why we decided to go with sort of an open world design, sort of like you go wherever you want, and whatever clues you find, that's up to you. And that was the initial starting points of designing the Painscreek killings, just to recreate the immersive experience as an investigator.
Okay. That is a good answer, and this next one, I think Yoshiha, as a level designer, might be able to help with a bit more. So, as you've mentioned, that the developers have been afraid historically to kind of turn the player loose into a world for fear of that they're going to get lost or that they won't be able to complete it. And that is a big risk that you took with Painscreek, which I really admire. And it definitely pays off and has its downfalls in places. A question that I specifically wanted to ask, though, is how did you guys feel towards sequence breaking? The possibility that a player, by one way or another, may end up playing a part of the game out of order and perhaps finding something way earlier than they were supposed to. Do you consider that fair game in the Painscreek killings?
I think this is well, to be fair, when it comes to the game flow and game design, I think Fery is the best person to kind of explain that. I can give my 2 cents based on like feedback from the playtesting and what we've also encountered from some of the beta testers who early on played our game. But I do think that this question is actually best suited for Fery.
Okay. It's open to both of you. I hope you consider every question open to both of you if you have something you want to throw out.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So sorry, the question is, can you repeat again?
Yeah, it's
just to make sure.
So sequence breaking in a linear video game is when a player, by one way or another, ends up breaking the intended sequence of events, and maybe they find something or complete a puzzle before the game wants them to. And since Painscreek Killings is supposed to be an open world game, do you consider this to be a fair approach for a player to play, or would you hope that a player does not sequence break when they play? I could give you an example if you
right. Okay.
at least one of the 4 players we found the box in the tree stump that is hidden in the playground, and by complete coincidence, when looking for the key to the church, also found the code outside of the church 1203. And this, of course, is part of a subplot that occurs in the final act of the game. But this one player ended up actually opening this tree stump around the halfway point, which led to some very quick and incriminating evidence being found. That would be an example of sequence breaking in Painscreek.
Right. I think that when we designed Painscreek, I was working with a coworker. Her name was Yuri. So we wanted the game to not be hand-holding as well as not be linear. We wanted players to feel like whatever clues they find will lead them to the next clue and so on, right? But at the same time, we know that if we do like a clue that leads to another clue, it'll be very linear. It'll be a very straightforward approach, and there isn't much room for exploring the entire so-called landscape or the game level, right? So we thought about it, and I think the way we decided to do was that the game will be hard locked in certain parts. For example, the hard lock part would require a key as opposed to a code. Because if it's a code, some people might stumble upon it online by accident, and then it will break the entire game, right? But with a key, even if you found it by accident, you have to still search for the key in the game in order to proceed. And those are kind of far and few in between, the hard locks one. The game has a lot of keys, but you can find them in any order you want, as long as it's within the act. So the game has actually 3 main acts, and within each act, the player is able to go anywhere they want until they reach the hard lock point, where it will require a specific key in order to move forward. So in that sense, I think the game allows an open world nature or feeling, even though it's kind of semi-open world and it's kind of directed towards the hard lock section. But the impression that you can go anywhere you want, I think gives a lot of freedom and a lot of so-called I think a custom experience for the player.
Right.
So the way I play and the way you play might be different, right? During one of our testing phase, there was one girl who actually, she wasn't a gamer, but when she was play testing it, she looked at she passed by the church first, and she found out that all the doors are locked, and she said, there might be someone who might put it under a mat. So she goes around looking at the mats, and actually she couldn't find any mats, but she saw the vases. So she looked around, and that actually led her to find the key much earlier than we anticipated. But for us, it was okay because it didn't break the game. Instead, it sort of how to say, we were happy that she found it out of our own intuition. And that, I think, was what we were hoping for when we designed the Painscreek killings.
That is spectacular to hear, because one of the 4 people who I actually sampled had the exact same thing happen to them. They actually were able to get into the church before they visited either the mansion or the hospital, where you find the requisite clue to find the key.
So I want to add on top of that a little bit. I think one of the things that also was like a key, how do I say, a key, I guess, point that we wanted to kind of ensure was that no matter what was like the manner, for example, there's a bunch of keys, there's a bunch of passcodes, but we didn't want any of the passcodes or any of the keys to be arbitrary in the sense of it's for the sake of the puzzle that this information exists. It's like, if the person exists in real life, what would? So why am I explaining this? I think there was one player I was watching a playthrough, and it's interesting because when we structure the game from Act 1, 2, 3, we have specific intentions. Okay, players are going to find this information, and this is going to lead to this information, which then at certain point in the game they should be able to unlock this. Of course, we can't prevent players from sometimes unlocking that early on. And I remember I was watching a playthrough of a player, and he basically stumbled upon some sort of evidence that related to Vincent. And even way before we even mentioned Vincent had a connection to Scott, he kind of made the assumption, he was thinking based on the relationship of the character. He said, you know what, I'm pretty sure Vincent and Scott, even though we had at that point in the game there was no clue for that. And then he said, I think one of the passwords for the clue was Vincent's birthday. And so he says, so he searched actually information related to Scott and then found his birthday and put it into the key and unlocked it and found information way before, and watching that as a developer, I think that was one of the most, I was smiling from ear to ear. This is, I think this is really cool in the way that, and this is, I think I have to give credit to the original designers of the game, which is Fery and the core team, Yuri, Fmie. They really created a game in which the world feels real, right? So even if you were to take some things, a little early or a little too late, it still feels cohesive in the sense that, this makes sense. If this was given a real world, everything feels like it should exist. It's not like something arbitrary for the sake of just having a puzzle there or having a key there, if that makes sense.
So what I'm hearing from you, Yoshi, is that if a player extrapolates that this is a real person and that the combination of their safe is something important to them and guesses the date of one of their children and it works, you would encourage that as a developer because they made it an inference about the characters in the game. And
yeah, I would say so, because part of the intention of of all these small things is to understand who are these characters, what is the relationship to them, and indirectly we're kind of encouraging players hey, how much do you know about this person? What is the relationship in nature? Just even through this, I think the small things, and this is something I don't think any of us really planned, per se, but in having certain things kind of be more intimate for certain players, or for certain, sorry, not players. So for certain characters, we're kind of indirectly kind of asking players how much do you know about this character, like what is the nature and relationship between this person. When you say, oh, it's um yeah, for example, it's Vincent's birthday, like what does Vincent have to do with this character, who is, it's I think it's something that even I didn't realize until I started watching playthroughs. Like, wow, players are like, we've kind of like more or less slightly encouraged players to kind of go beyond than just trying to solve a puzzle. It's something that, I like I said, it made me smile from ear to ear, that it was kind of like, I can't speak on the fact that Fery intentionally designed it to be this way, but this was a really kind of welcome surprise to see that players going above and beyond to try to not just understand the case file and the mystery, but also understand the characters.
All right, that is a more than satisfactory answer. Thank you very much for that. So, up next, I have this bit here. Your game was designed not only to contain no hints, but being that it contains no hints, you would expect a player to be able to complete it, just with the resources in the game and without ever having to go outside. Would you consider it cheating then, if a player felt for one reason or another that they should go to the internet and look up what to do next? Like, would you discourage that?
We thought about that. Yuri and I talk about it and say, what if they do that? And the conclusion we have is, if they want to do that, there's nothing we can do to stop it, right? Because more importantly, I think most importantly is that whatever makes the game the way they want to play and it makes them happy, I think that's okay. Now, I think that if you are a real, like a detective genre fan, you would want to try to crack the case yourself. And because of that, I think you would not try to go online to find the hints unless you are really stuck. So I think that it's not an issue how the players play, but we would prefer for them not to go and see the guide, because once you use it one time, you will use it all the time. It's an unfortunate thing because it makes it easier, and you do not want to pull your hair just trying to find one key or a code, right? But the moment you do that, it actually breaks the immersion. And it's something we don't advocate, but there's nothing we can do to stop players from doing so.
So to someone who is going to play Painscreek Killings for the first time and who is a lover of the genre, you would encourage them to avoid seeking any kind of outside help at all costs, no matter how difficult it stumps them.
Yes, because we have given, okay, we designed Painscreek in such a way where the main storyline to reach the end is not very difficult. It's doable, and it's not very, it's quite challenging, but it's not extremely hard or extremely challenging. If you want to know the entirety of the lore of the characters, locations, and all those, then that's a different story. So with the main, for example, for the main storyline, there is more than one way to access an information. But with side stories or side information, sometimes you have only one source of hint where you can find the information. And if you miss that, you miss that entirely. But for the main storyline, you wouldn't. Mm. So I think that we try to take consideration in which, what if the player missed this? What if the player missed that? And we play through a lot of times. And our conclusion is, if you pay enough attention, you will be able to reach the end. It might be challenging in certain parts, right? But if you get stuck, stop the game, take a walk, look at your notes, see what is it that you might have missed, or that you might have not found. And worst case scenario, this is the worst case, backtrack to the locations you have already unlocked and see if you have missed something. And that's how the game was supposed to be designed, for players to not get stuck.
So in this respect, would you say that Painscreek was intended then for hardcore mystery fans and not so much for casual fans of the genre?
I wouldn't say it's hardcore. I would say it's any fans, but you have to have some patience for the game, right? I think that's like the minimum or the threshold for what kind of players would be kind of have fun in this game.
Okay.
Can I add something to that?
Go ahead.
I think it's kind of funny because when one of the things I think we did worry about that was concern early on was would players be would players be able to understand the intention of the game? Because I think if you look at like if you go to the Steam store page and you look at similar games like us, games like Vanishing of Ethan Carter or Gone to the Rapture may be tagged or Gone Home may be tagged alongside with us. And then if those people see our game and they try to play it, like it's not a linear progression. Players kind of I remember I saw this one negative review comment on our game where they said locked door simulator because they went through each door trying to unlock the game. They didn't know. Basically, what I'm trying to say is they didn't know how to play our game. They didn't know what to expect. They just thought, oh, the developers don't know what they're doing. This is too open ended. And I feel like in those cases, I think I'm a little bit a purist in the sense that I don't want to give players hints. I want to make it as more challenging as possible. But at the same time, I also understand that sometimes players don't know how to play our game. So if they need to go to, look behind the scenes of the hood just to understand, oh, this is the intention and understanding of what the game's intended to be, then I feel like okay, then you could put the hood down and like actually understand, because that's one of the kind of how do we educate the players to understand what our game is. It's not a walking simulator in the sense if you just walk, you will find the answer. It's not how it's intended. So I think there is like a, how do I say it? And there was no easy way to do it because there's like what we call a gamer mentality where it's this idea that things will be kind of spoon fed to you. There's going to be, markers, but it's we're following a more traditional old school style. So I also don't recommend that you look at, but if for some people, it's fine to look at it, even if just to understand like what the structure is, and then you can enjoy the experience for what it is.
Right. Okay. It sounds. I mean, what I mainly infer from that is that there is a type of gamer who might bounce off of the design of Painscreek, especially if they're impatient and don't understand what they're supposed to get out of the experience. But for every player who bounces off of the game, so to speak, there is going to be one who really finds something special and unique in the experience. And that sounds like it was something you calculated. So this next question that I have requires a little bit of prefacing. So I actually held a poll on my channel about a week ago asking my audience, about 500 took the poll, what do you prefer when you read, watch, or play a mystery story of any kind? And the two choices were solve the mystery on your own before the reveal is revealed to you, or to be shocked by the reveal and then realize all of the clues afterwards. And the results is that 42% actually prefer to solve it on their own before the story intends them to, and 58% prefers to be shocked by that reveal. And I am actually kind of surprised by those numbers because I figured that the majority would prefer the solving experience of being the detective. But what I thought I'd like to do is flip the question on you guys, since you are the creators of the mystery. When you consider who's going to play your game, would you prefer that the player is able to solve the mystery on their own before the end, or would you rather have them be shocked at probably say the last 5 to 10% of the game by the reveal of who the killer is?
Okay, you sure you have to go?
I can share.
It's a personal question, if anything. Like there's no right or wrong answer.
No, okay. So I think I think the gaming medium is a very, very unique format in the sense where the players experience, like you basically control the actions, and if you're like writing for a movie, you can basically create exact beats, and you can also exactly tell when. But for players, it's like there's if you're ever deriving from the non-linear format, even to just some degree, there's always player choice. And so for me, when it comes to the gaming medium, I'm always a fan of player experience first, rather than trying to like wow someone with your story. If the player chooses a direction in which he gets to solve it, or whether he comes to the conclusion where he's shocked himself, not because the developer wanted to say. I prefer, or I guess I'm more of a fan of designs like that. It's one of the reasons why I think why I really liked excuse me, why I really liked Deus Ex, both Humankind and because they don't that game, there's many different choices, but you don't really know how that's going to affect it until you play, through each of them. And me being wanting to understand the hood, I played every single version of where the story could go. And I think that's what I prefer. I think I prefer like being the player to like make those decisions. If the game tells me later on, oh, you made an error, I'm like, okay, that's my experience. Yeah, I don't want the developer per se to tell me, we want to tell you this, and therefore this is the message we're trying to say. I like to be able to craft my own narrative, and maybe it's one of the reasons why I kind of lean towards game designs or games that does that a little bit more. But that's just a personal taste for me.
Okay. And Mr. Tomi?
Okay. I've never thought about that so much because the entirety of the game, I was focusing on the story beats, right? Using the 3x structure system to develop the story. So we thought that by the time you find out who the killer is, that's because you have crossed out all your red herrings and you have already you are really suspicious of one guy and you have made effort to go that path to find out who that person is, and you have found the keys or the codes or anything that can unlock that path. And so when you reach the climax, before the climax, it's not out of trial and error. You have exhausted most of your resources, right? All your hints and stuff, right? So I was surprised that quite a number of people were shocked at how the ending took place and they didn't like it. And I understand why. And I think that was, in hindsight, we could have really done it better. Now, going back to your question is,
yeah, I will just interject and say I may have another question later about the ending of the game, but we can
Okay.
revisit that when we have time.
Right. So I think Yuri and I designed the game such that it's meant to be an experience, a detective experience, right? And it's not supposed to be so difficult that you cannot solve it. So personally, I would, it's a hard question to answer because I would like to solve it, but I know I'm not that smart. So if I cannot solve it, I don't want to get stuck forever. I would like to have some kind of hints or some kind of direction, like letting me know where I did wrong so that I can actually move forward. But our game doesn't have a hint system. And that's kind of like, the two-edged sword thing where it might be good, but it might be bad. It depends on who the player is, right? And so I think I personally would still choose to solve it myself if I'm a real true crime fan. But if I'm working whole day and I'm tired and I just want some kind of passive entertainment, I'd love to be entertained by the game. And from the angle, I would love to have the story continue even if I fail. So again, it's hard to answer. It depends on what the game design is. Yeah.
I see, because there definitely is a little bit of a difference between mystery in the book format and the game format. And, when I say book, I think that mystery books and movies are much more similar to each other than they are to games. And before we move on, I actually just want to say that Yoshi, something you said really resonated with me, because I have a whole brief bit in my video that I'm planning, or that I've written, where I just talk about how mystery adapts very, very well to the video game genre, because unlike other popular genres, mystery is implicitly a game. It is the author giving the reader a question and then saying, can you answer this question before I tell you the answer? And, really, there's been almost a flaw in mystery in other mediums, because it becomes a spectator sport or a passive sport, that you will have Sherlock Holmes or Columbo or somebody else to answer that question for you. But in Painscreek Killings, it is necessitated that you have to solve it yourself and keep pushing forward. I'll go ahead and bring up this because I think it was interesting. Something that you had a page or two discussing in your book is that you actually do have what you consider to be veiled hand-holding, like hidden hints that you put into the Painscreek killings as a way of helping the player without them knowing they are being helped. And you describe one way of doing this as the character of Stephen Moss, who was a detective who came to Painscreek previously, and finding his writings, which kind of like point you in the right direction of the case and kind of refocus the player. There's also the automatic collection and organization of documents. Important documents in the game will be stored with the player because I can see that that's not really a way of offering hints. But realistically, if a player wanted to, they could just write down every little thing. It's just a convenience, really. And the third one that really interested me, that I totally see now that you mention it, is the Steam achievements. That as you pick up or the last book that a character wrote in the game, or as you pick up the last tool, you will receive an achievement that will tell you like this was the diary of this person, their story is completed now. And everybody who I sampled playing the game, they all took notice of these achievements, and a lot of times they even inferred clues from them. A big one is picking up Andrew Reed's diary in the burnt down house. Seeing the story of Andrew Reed confirms, oh, this is Andrew Reed, the gardener's house. They previously hadn't realized whose house they were in. And I felt that that was a very effective plan. It was, especially the Steam achievements. Was that something that you intended to do from the start, or how long into the process did you come to this idea of giving hidden hints to the players?
Regarding the Steam achievements, that was totally unplanned.
Really?
Right. When we made the game, we finished the entire game. Then we thought about, oh, we might need to make Steam achievements. And we have no idea what kind of achievements appeal to players. So we thought like, okay, how about this? If they collect all the Dorothy's diaries, we'll unlock an achievement. So there's a number of achievements, right? Mm-hmm. And later on, we then realized this could be a checklist for players. And so it wasn't intended like that. But for Stephen Moss, we did design him so that he would be so-called like a checkpoint for players that they are on the right track. Again, it's not purposely done that way, but we did know that what if the players play for 10 hours and they are totally lost, right? And is there any kind of guide that would let them know that, hey, you're at least on the right track, you're just missing something so they can move forward? So Stephen Moss was the character that we use as so-called an in-game help. It's very passive, but it's there.
See,
you know, one of the things that I think one of the things that will always go back and forth within, you know, the core team was that this question of what was too hand-holding and what was not. I remember one of the not disagreements, but one of the things that me and Fery debated on was that in the game there was a Slim Jim that you could use to open the car. I had no idea what a Slim Jim was. And, Fery was telling me, doesn't everyone know what this is? And I'm like, maybe from your era, yeah. But from my era, I don't even know what that is. Like, for me, if I see that, it's like a tool to like, it's like a wrench. I don't know. Like, it's kind of weird. But, then we agreed to an understanding of, okay, let's put a flyer there explaining the purpose of a Slim Jim, in the guise of kind of a more accurate understanding. It's kind of weird, even in hindsight, when I look at it, it's like kind of weird that it's there. But, we also wanted to take the route that there might be players like me who may have no idea what that thing is. When I watched some of the playthroughs, some people picked up, they knew exactly what it's for. But we wanted to cover our bases in that sense. And I think there were small things here and there when it comes to hints and clues that we always debated. Is this too much? Is this too little? Like, oh, I don't like that. Oh, there was always discussion and opinions in the designing room.
So is this how the instructional flyers in the game about how to break into cars came about?
Pretty much.
I see.
Pretty much.
Yeah, I feel like I would probably get arrested if I went around hanging up flyers saying, hey, this is a tool you can use to break into your car if you lock out the keys. So that, everyone took notice of that. And surprisingly, all 4 of the playthroughs, because I think I expected other people might have trouble with it, all 4 people picked up the lockout tool, and I think all it took was picking up and looking at the description and saying can be used to break into locked cars. That was all they needed, and everyone immediately then went right to Stephen Moss's car in the town square and cracked it open, which I think you guys consider too. That's where I called the end of the first act in the video. That's like the first hard lock in the game. Apart from some that I might revisit, most of what I wanted to talk about is pertaining to the actual story and some of the story events going later into the game. So first, I think I should ask you, again, Painscreek was released close to, what, 5 or 6 years ago now? Maybe longer now that I think about it. Do you both feel like you are relatively still familiar with the events of the game to talk about some specific story events?
Vaguely, yes,
Okay.
for me. Yes.
I understand that
familiar.
that you must be busy people and you're working on new projects. I know that you have seen Investigators that has come out since, so I completely understand if some of these are details you might be fuzzy on at this point. So I will tend to be less specific with these questions, and if anything, I would also just issue a spoiler warning because I feel like we probably will be discussing more blatant spoilers towards the end of the game in some of these questions. So the big one, the first one at least that I will ask is by the end of the game, throughout the game, there is a lot of like hints and pieces that gently allude to a supernatural presence in the Painscreek killings, and by the end of the game, that becomes completely confirmed with the sequence that we can discuss more later. Was the vision of having like paranormal and ghost activity in Painscreek something you always intended for the game? And if so, do you feel that it might at times clash with the otherwise realistic mystery-solving approach?
Okay. Regarding the use of the paranormal stuff, this was actually an idea from my co-writer. After we considered using paranormal stuff right in the game, she said that most of the people who think about horror or about ghosts or spirits or whatever, they tend to come from a very bad angle, which is they are there to hurt you. And she said, what if we are able to express it in a way where they just have unfinished business and they need help, and they are not there to hurt you purposely, but we are usually afraid of them, and so that's how it led to in the end, again, it's a spoiler for those who have never played the game, but the spirit would actually help you at the end. So as for originally the game didn't have that, but again, the origin of the game was vastly different from what it is now, and a lot of limitations force us not to use whatever we have in mind, and eventually we took the route of the paranormal. Was that something like we did it on purpose to make it interesting or not? I think as an Asian, and my co-writer is from Japan, it is quite common for us to hear about paranormal stuff, and I think that was the reason why we included that in the game.
Okay. And Yoshi, I don't suppose you had much input on the inclusion of story elements?
No,
Okay.
the story was pretty much, by the time I joined the development team, we was more, I think it was very, very full onto, production. So a lot of the story elements were written by Fery and Yuri, and I mostly was able to support in like, some game design elements and maybe some small changes to like hints or stuff, but like in terms of the core story that was already developed and done.
Alrighty then. I think I might as well just mention, just to put your minds at ease a bit, that I anticipate probably at least 98% of the people who will watch this interview to have already played the game. So we don't have to feel like we're robbing people of these reveals. I assume everyone watching this interview will already know the full story. So, because I understand that might be something you're a little hesitant to do, to discuss some of the linchpin details of this game. Let's see. Let me pick my next question, because I could choose one of several here. Let's see. So this one is something that I'm curious to just hear if you have a reaction to, because it's a little bit bizarre from the playthroughs that we screened. There were several instances among the people who volunteered their footage where people began to look for clues in places that I don't think your team intended them to. Like an example is that one player began comparing handwriting of documents that one character had written and began to think that the handwriting looked different from one to the other. And this led them to believe that one of the documents could have been fake or forged and that there was someone else who was manipulating things unseen. And this caused them to go down a whole rabbit hole of theories. And another instance was another person who was me. I'll just go ahead and say this happened in my playthrough, is that I began searching one of the characters' homes for some kind of environmental evidence that they were left-handed, like what side of their desk do they keep their writing utensil on, or what side of their bed is their nightstand on, or things like that. And unless I'm mistaken, I don't think there were assets or details implemented into Painscreek to like support this level of nitty-gritty investigation. So how do you feel as developers of a player who might get too into the detective spirit and go looking for clues where there are none? Is that something you might see as a flaw in your design?
If I do see players going that route, I feel like we could have improved the game. That's for sure. Because whenever I see someone playing the game and they did something that I didn't anticipate, and thus we didn't include in the game, I would love to have a chance to improve on it, remake it or whatever, so that the experience is more complete. Now, in this case, you're right. The handwriting, the left-handed stuff, those were not designed in the game. And yeah, that's all I can say right now.
I definitely see that could be a little concerning, and post-launch to see that some people were looking into things that weren't there. But I can applaud on some details that you did clearly have some attention put to the handwriting, because one of our 4 detectives, after reading the anonymous letter written to Stephen Moss that hired him to begin the investigation, when she later went into the Roberts mansion and opened a character, Dorothy Patterson's journal, the first thing that she did was she went into her inventory and she looked at the handwriting written to Stephen Moss, and she came to the conclusion, I think Dorothy Patterson is the one who anonymously hired the PI. And
wow.
And by the end of the game, you find out that is correct, and the only reason she did that is because of the attention to detail of giving a specific character specific handwriting. So
Right. Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, I just want to say we did separate the NPCs with the handwritings to be separate, but we never expected, like what you said, which is the player use that to deduce who hired you. I think that play is great, to have found out about that.
Yeah, she was. I think she got 100% on her first playthrough of the game. Found literally everything, and I don't think she even used a single spoiler. She was the model player.
Yeah, I would, I think to that point, I think I agree with Fery in hindsight. I'll be honest, when I initially was helping, like do some of the iterations for after we've got some feedback from the game, I was always, personally, I was always coming from the direction, oh, this is too difficult. We need to make it even more easier for the players. Oh, it's a bit too more difficult. I think I underestimated, like, the true fans of this game are people who are willing to search every nook and cranny and willing to turn every single, raw cornerstone and I underestimated that there would be players like this. And I think definitely moving forward from here, I think it's definitely something we want to take into consideration. When again, I think the good example was the example when someone made the connection to Vincent and the relationship between him and Mr. Roberts, and kind of deduced all that information and unlocked something. And again, it was completely cut off. It took me off guard. And I think we as developers, what we wanted to do was we just created like a base frame for ourselves, like, what is the bare minimum we wanted to cover when it comes to the information, to make sure that there's no loopholes. I think at the time we were very new developers. It's the first time designing a game, and at the very least we just wanted to make sure that there were no angles that could kind of derail the entire investigation. So to see that, now that we understand what the frame could look like, but to even fill those extra holes with extra detail, I think would be something we are looking forward to to filling in, I think, and I think it would provide an even better experience for players. And though that being said, for Scene Investigators, the following project, those were things that we wanted to fill, and we realized, okay, we can improve in that. And I think Painscreek was just the first step for us to realize what was possible, what our hardcore fans look like, that, and things that I think we understood. Okay, we want to respect the players a little bit more in that sense, and that we can make steps to improve on that. But it's something, at least personally for me, really surprised me. Like, wow, there are players who are going to like you said, there's model players who are found everything. I never once in my life I'd believe that such players existed. So for me, it's a welcome surprise. Yes.
Okay, so what I gather from that is that you slightly underestimated how inclined some of the players would be to solve the mystery, and because of that, Scene Investigators and future projects you're making are going to be more difficult than Painscreek because you are holding these players to a higher standard. Is that similar to what you're trying to say, or not necessarily?
Yes and no. I mean, yes, in the sense where I think we wanted to up it's, I guess, a little bit of like difficulty in a sense. I do want to kind of make the point that I think Scene Investigators and Painscreek Creelings at its core are two very different games. But in terms of a lot of the elements, there are a lot of very similar elements. Like some of the puzzle designs very similar. Some of the there are some story elements that are also quite similar, and there are also certain details that we put into the game that we took from feedback of like, oh, we could flesh out, like we call it environmental storytelling, just by looking by the placement of objects, that you could tell, oh, this person was this. You can infer characteristics just from simply the environment. So those are things that we definitely try to take into consideration. But I do think at its core, Painscreek and Scene Investigators are two different games.
Okay. So let me go ahead and rephrase. I wanted to ask specifically about the ending of the game and some choices made during it. And after what you said earlier, Fery, I think the more appropriate question to ask would be, now that if you had more time to work on the game, or if you knew then what you did now, what are things you would have changed about Painscreek Killings?
Good question.
Take your time with this one.
So what can be improved, right? What can be changed? Prior to that, I want to first explain a bit about why the ending was the way it is.
Okay.
The original design of the game was supposed to have a midpoint in a game where the protagonist, which is the player, have found something that was a bit too deep in her investigation, and thus she was knocked out, and she would wake up in the morgue, the basement of the hospital, and that would let players know that they are not alone, right? And there would be hints where also after that, when you are walking, there will be an incident where behind you a flower pot would drop right behind you. And it's a scripted event, but it's supposed to let you know that there's someone out there, and you do not know who it is, right? Unfortunately, we weren't able to implement that into the game, and so we only kept the climax, which was designed right from the beginning. And in hindsight, I think that it wasn't really the best choice, because if you never spotted anything, you don't feel that that someone's stalking you. You never saw or noticed the fresh flowers in the cemetery and that kind of stuff. Then the ending will be like, huh? How did it even happen? And it's a totally different game, right, Sam? So that was, I think, like the drawback we had from implementing the ending as the way it is now. Going to the next part, which is how would we have improved it? We would say that, first of all, we want to let players who have actually found out everything on their own be able to say that that's the end of the game, and that they are worthy as investors and detectives or journalists, right? And that they would have received an A ranking despite whether or not they were able to survive, the coming killing, which is from the killer, right?
Right.
But we would also implement something where if you want to know where the body of PI Stephen Moss is, then you will trigger the real ending, which is the killer would then actually chase after you. So we would improve upon that. So if I have a chance to revisit, TPK with the core team, that's something that we would definitely do to improve the game.
Okay.
And lots of other small stuff. But for example, one I remember one guy said, "If this is the entire town, what's the gas station?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, there's no gas station," And we used to have a kind of like an elementary school thing in the location in the Painscreek village, right? But we took it out because it didn't really serve any purpose for players to visit that. So for a future remake, if it does come to that, we will definitely improve a lot of those stuff to make it more authentic, to make it more real, and to make it more immersive for the players.
Okay, that's very interesting. What you're mainly talking about the ending, because I definitely there were some people who enjoyed the ending, and then there were other people. One person, in fact, it was the lady who completed the game 100% and found just about everything. She is notoriously on her channel not a fan of horror games, and I don't think she at all expected what she was getting into when she started playing Painscreek. She really enjoyed the game, but the ending definitely was not something that she was expecting. And when the message becomes on the screen, you can no longer save the game. Her reaction was to crouch down and hide behind the desk.
Okay.
And she stayed there for a couple of minutes before deciding she had to try to escape.
Sorry about that.
I think it's perfectly valid because a lot of people do say that in the last 10 minutes it becomes a horror game, and is that something that you envisioned in it, that it suddenly becomes a horror game, or did you always see Painscreek as something of a mystery horror from the beginning?
No, I think because we designed it using the triac structure, and we felt that the climax would be needed as a form of payoff for players who have invested a lot in it, And so we kept the ending. It wasn't meant to be a horror thing. It was meant to, well, first of all, if this is what we are thinking, and I think like looking back now, we probably are wrong, is that if you, there's only one map in the game. There's no mini map, right? So we use landmarks to design or design the game. Like Yoshi was the one who actually designed the entire village. So one of the things he asked me was, what do you need in that village? I said, well, every angle should look nice. That was one of the things. But the other one was that let's implement landmarks so that when players step into the landmark, they would immediately know where they are on the map. So if you have played that 2-3 hours, the map that is very new to you in the beginning, and you all often find yourself like opening it up, not to get lost. By the time you are in the middle of the game, 2, 3, 4 hours later, you would be pretty comfortable with it. And you are looking more like shortcuts, right? Hidden alleyways that would make your backtracking quicker. And so we thought that by the end of the game, if it's about 10-hour game, you probably know Painscreek inside out to a certain degree. And you have gone through the sewer, you have gone through the hospital, you have gone through all the locations, right? That means that you might not get lost. That's what we thought. And then we decided to also have the spirit, Sophia, actually appear to help you just in case you get lost, especially like in the sewer area. So that's why we did implement her to be a help for the players. It wasn't meant to be a horror thing. We did think that for climax, it should be a bit adrenaline pumping, a bit of there's a tension. We in no way are trying to make it a PTSD thing for players. Never, but I think some players did say that they had PTSD after playing our game.
That's a bit more extreme, but...
Right, but that guy gave a thumbs up, so I think we're okay with it. Yeah.
All right. Well, on the note of things to be changed, I do want to share that there were 2 common critiques that I believe everyone who played the game that I sampled pointed out, and they're from two very specific points in the game. One of them is the basement, about the halfway point of the game, where a basement of the hunting cabin where you find Scott Brooks's secret room with the investigation. In the regular basement of the cabin, there is a journal in there that Scott writes, where he ultimately documents the truth he found out about what happened to the lady named Sophia before he knows that she was his mother. And this is seemingly a mistake, actually, because in this book, Scott documents, like, he knows what happened to this woman. He knows that the three people who were involved in her death, whether it was accidental or intentional. And then the next revelation is that when you open up the secret room, there is a massive corkboard of investigating to try to find out who killed Sophia. Was this maybe an oversight? Because according to the journal, Scott knows how she died before he knows that she was his mother. But in the investigation room, it seems that she finds out that this was his mother, and then he's trying to find out who killed her. Did that maybe slip past a screening or something?
I think that was an oversight. I think for the diaries that we placed, quite a number of them had to be moved around as we iterate the game. And so the corkboard thing that was in the basement, that was designed very early on, but there was a limitation in what we can present on the corkboard. So I think that not letting players know that the corkboard states that he has found out who his mom is was an oversight.
Okay.
It
was. I definitely could sense that journals had been moved around, because it felt like the whole plot hole, I guess, could be fixed if you just picked up that journal and you placed it inside the secret room. But presenting that information before what is found inside the corkboard room definitely created a little bit of discord in the flow of the story, which most people noticed, but it didn't ruin the experience for them. And I just thought I would share that, because that was definitely a critique that came up. And then the other one is actually a puzzle design, and that is I just have to ask about this, the dartboard puzzle. Have you guys heard much feedback on that puzzle, and a very specific comment about it?
I have not.
I have actually. I read all the reviews.
I see. And I commend you for that.
And I know that the corkboard was an issue to quite a number of people, quite a lot actually. And I did look back to see whether or not it was a flaw in the design. And the conclusion I had was we didn't design it wrongly. There was there was a real intention behind the way we designed it, because we didn't want players to feel like, oh, they go to the darts, they can solve it immediately and move forward. Just like the cabinet in the sheriff outpost, where when you first try to open it, it's already locked, right? Mm-hmm. And there's no way you try to. I know that some players, actually, one player said he or she spent like 2 hours trying all the combinations, But the fact is, you will find out that you can unlock it later. And so Painscreek was designed such that if you do get stuck, you can either like brute force your way in, right? Or you can take the intended route, which is let's find more clues, So the dartboard was one of that example. Unfortunately, I think it backfired on many players. And a lot of them were frustrated, and they tried to brute force in, and they said that we made a mistake with the rules of the dartboard, and the photos were wrong, and even the texture on the dartboard where the hole was wrong, and a lot of those, right?
I have to point out that the last thing you said, especially for Yoshi, if you aren't familiar with the dartboard critiques.
Yes, I was going to ask.
So the long and short of it, just to recap the entire situation, is that it's in Bernard the butler's office. There is a dartboard on the back of the door, and it has, I think, 4 of the 6 darts in the board. And there's a code. There's a hint in the room that says the code to my desk is the red darts total minus the yellow darts total, or something like that. And so a lot of players got this clue, and they felt, knowing that darts is played with 6 darts and there's only 4 on the board, but there's 2 seen across the room, they interpreted this as an algebraic puzzle. Like, they're giving us this much information, there's 4 darts on the board, and then we have to examine the board to try to figure out and extrapolate where those other 2 darts were, to then calculate the score and find out what the combination is. And the reason, the sole reason that this hung up on so many players is that when you look at the dartboard, there is a very distinct black mark on it. And everyone talked about this black mark. All 4 of the people that I viewed in many of the reviews, it looks like a dead pixel almost, just like a black square in an empty space on the dartboard. And everyone saw this and interpreted this as that's where one of the darts was. Okay, so that's a new clue that I have. Now I have 5 out of the 6 positioned. So then it encouraged people to go down this massive rabbit hole of guessing and checking where that 6th dart could have been, long before the game reveals to them a photo that just shows all 6 darts in their original position. So it was...
Right.
I see.
That was where the miscommunication came from. It's so funny that such a small thing, it was pixels, tiny pixels on the dartboard that were suggesting a dart had been in this specific spot, led so many people into trying to force a puzzle. At one point, one of them actually became frustrated and searched the hint because they thought that they weren't understanding it, and then they learned that you weren't supposed to solve it at that point. So that was easily the biggest complaint that I think our survey found about the game. So that wraps up some of the smaller things, and I realize that we've gone a little bit over the time that we were expecting, so I thank you for bearing with me for that. I just had a couple of fun palate cleanser questions if you were curious in answering those, but if you are in a rush, I can cut you guys loose if you need.
I'm fine. I have time.
I'm here for it.
All right, good. So I figured I'd just ask each of you, since you have carved out this very unique niche in mystery game design, and I hope that you continue working with it, because I think that this is possibly the pioneering of a new genre that has a lot of potential. What is a mystery story that you would consider your favorite, or a mystery that you think has been very influential or made you fall in love with the genre?
Oh.
I understand that favorite can be a very difficult word to ascribe to any story. Like, if you ask me favorite mystery, I would probably freeze up too. So what's just one that comes to mind as like a mystery you really enjoyed and admire?
For me, there is a Japanese manga. Unfortunately, it's not actually popular on the Western side and Western countries, and it was kind of in the 1990s. So it's called the Kindaichi Murder Mysteries. It's similar to Conan, but the difference is Conan detectives. It's meant for even kids. They can watch it and enjoy it. But Kindaichi borders on, I would say, almost sea investigators level, where you have to find the motive in order to solve the case. Just looking at the forensics, you won't be able to solve the case because you won't know who did it. So the motive actually would narrow down the suspects, and based on the motive, the means and the window of opportunity, you will be able to pinpoint. So I really love that. However, there is one film that I really love, is Zodiac, and I feel that if I were to make a game about mystery investigation, I would love to have that to go that route where you have to solve everything on your own. And Zodiac for me is kind of like a masterpiece in its own, you know. And that's one, the girl with the dragon tattoo, not the American version. I forgot which country it was, but that one really made me feel like I was the detective in that movie, in order to solve and find out what happened to the granddaughter of the person who hired me, you know. So that was, for me, like, it was gripping for me from beginning to end, and that was a really good example of what a detective film would be, or experience would be.
All right. It's curious that you say Zodiac, considering that is a mystery film that does not have an answer at the end of it. Since,
right.
Historically, it's never been clear as to the identity of the Zodiac killer, but I just want to be sure. Did you say Kendaichi murder mysteries? How do you say that? Because I've never heard of the manga you were talking about, and I would be interested in looking into it.
It's Kindaichi, Kindai. I think it's almost impossible to find in English, I think. But again, you might be able to find it online. I'm not sure.
Maybe somewhere, because I'm
Yeah.
always looking for highly recommended good mysteries, and especially a language barrier
Okay.
does not scare me. So I would be very interested in pursuing that. Yoshi, how about you?
Okay.
I feel like the kind of I think the stories that like the mystery stories that I grew up with were very, very mild. So I grew up with like the Boxcar Children. What's another good example? Like the children's version of the what's it called? The Sherlock Holmes stories.
Right.
I think Fery was the one who kind of introduced me to the more mature, I think, mystery stories. I think the one that he showed me that I really, really enjoyed was The Killings, the TV show, the one that actually inspired the Painscreek killings.
Yeah.
That one was really well done. But I think, I think I would have to say definitely the Sherlock Holmes stories, like the more closer to the original. I cannot read British English, so but the more slightly modernized version, I think I really enjoy those. I also do enjoy the Japanese anime Conan. It's I know Fery always tells me that when you compare Kendaichi to Conan, like Kendaichi is like a more mature version of Conan. So I haven't really given Kendaichi a shot just because I don't think I was able to see and find any English version of the manga. But anyway, I think for me those would probably do it. I read a lot of I think when I was growing up, I read a lot of children mystery books, but like at those point they don't really compare to the really, really good ones, which for me I would say Killings by far is by one of the top that I've enjoyed the most when it comes to like really fully fleshed mystery. Yeah.
I'm real excited to say that I know nothing about The Killings, and reading your book was the first that I had ever heard of the show. So I'm definitely gonna have to go check that one out once I find the time on my hands. Um, yeah, it's insightful. I asked the same thing to the last guy who I interviewed. He made a horror game that I found remarkable enough to make a big video on, and he ended up giving me recommendations that I had also not heard of. And when I pursued them, they ended up being very much worth my time. So I'm very excited to check out what you've just recommended. If anything, just to, I guess, tie things back together, EQ Studios is still working. They've done Scene Investigators, which I will admit I have not played yet, but when I'm finally through with my Painscreek Killings era, I totally intend to check out Scene Investigators. Would you maybe like to say a thing or two about that game, just for anyone out there who'd be curious about it?
Okay, Yoshi, I think you can explain this.
Okay, well, I think the one thing I do want to preface, and I said this before in the interview, but I do want to say it again. They're very two different games.
Yes.
So, and I think I think that's the one thing I definitely want to be clear with, because I think a lot of people are expecting like a Painscreek 2.0, which I'm like, it's not. I think if someone's asking me in passing, like, what can I expect from the like Painscreek Killings, I would say is akin to like a movie. Like you watch an entire movie, there's a beginning, middle, end. Scene Investigators kind of functions more like a TV show. It's like you get one episode of one, kind of a bite-sized mystery, and you have a beginning, middle, end just in that context. And then you have like multiple case files like that. I think initially when we first started the game, we had this idea of like this grand perspective of like this overarching, but I think even given our time frame and the manpower we had, it kind of proved a little too ambitious for us. So the game ended up being what it is. But I think if you guys are a fan of mystery, if you guys like challenging yourself to kind of look for like the small hidden clues and to understand the bigger picture of the story, I think there's also a free demo that I think if you want to get an idea of what the game is before even buying it, I think that's a good gateway to do so. I think that's all I can say about the game. I think there's kind of more small, minute things that I could talk about it, both things I loved and things I struggled eventually throughout the process. But it is, I think that would be for a conversation. I think when for a more in-depth conversation. Yeah.
All right. So sorry, you go.
I like to add something to that, which is Painscreek Killings was designed based on a story-rich narrative unfolding experience. So it's meant to hook you from beginning to end. And if you play it in the morning, you might finish the game, before you sleep. And it's meant like a good book, a good TV show that you're experiencing, right? And it uses a system called like a breadcrumb system. You pick a breadcrumbs, it leads all the way to somewhere else, and eventually leads to the ending. Sea Investigators is completely different. Sea Investigators is not meant to be played in one shot, get hooked from beginning to end. I was more like the managing the team for Sea Investigators, and so there were 4 or 5 designers on it, and each one would tackle a very specific case files, and it's very in depth. Like how like you said, like you go to the house in Painscreek, whether or not this guy is left-handed, you try to look right. You won't find that in TPK, but in Sea Investigators, every one of those stuff matters. So it's a more confined set design, a crime scene, a location, but everything in there matters. Almost everything in there matters, right?
Greater realism.
So, right. So it's if TPK is for detective fans or so-called like you like the detective shows on Netflix, let's say, and Sea Investigators would be for true crime fans who want to actually crack the case. And so as I was managing the team, I would meet them often just to do iterations on the project. Every time I finish one iteration, my brain is gone. I mean, I cannot think anymore. That's what Sea Investigators is. It really challenges your mind. But what I want to say is that if you have a friend, a buddy, or someone to play with, even with a group, Sea Investigators would be perfect, even better than TPK,
really?
For sure. Because TPK is a solo journey where you could invite someone and you can stream the game and they'll be talking about this and they'll have a fun time because you are always progressing. Sea Investigators, no, you are always facing an obstacle because, okay, wait, you have this. What does it mean? Your friends will say it meant with this. You will say like, okay, sure, but then with that clue and this, I think we are missing something. That is what Investigators is. So it's a very different different type of game, even though it might be in the same genre, and the experience is very different as well. And so I think like if you come to Sea Investigators with the kind of like anticipating, like Yoshi said, which is a Painscreek 2.0, you might just be, I don't know, disappointed, So I would say that treat it as a different game, play the demo and see whether or not it's something you actually appeals to you. That's a good start to see if the game is for you.
Thank God for
Play
demos.
with a friend.
Yeah.
Play with a friend. Well,
play with a friend.
As it happens, it's actually me who's running out of time here, and I was expecting to be the other way around. So thank you again so much. I think we'll have to wrap up here because I have other things to do, but I could talk for hours with you guys.
Okay.
It's just been a fascinating discussion, especially with the time I have just spent immersing myself into Painscreek and finally getting these rewarding answers to my questions. Is there... I don't know. I can provide any social media that you guys might like. I am so sorry, but it's about to kick me for another minute. it's saying that there's no time left. But otherwise, thank you again so much for your time, Yoshi and Fery.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for inviting us. Thank you.
I will send you an email follow-up. Take care now.
Bye-bye.
Okay.